Hey everyone, welcome back to Tactical Magic. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host, and I have one of my very best friends in the whole world with me today, Mr. David Knox, who is a brilliant man of, many different capacities, and he's working on an awesome project right now that I'm really excited to share. But before all that, let's tune the show in for just a second. It's not just about mastering technology. It's not just about brand or messaging. It's not just about making more money. It's about showing up in a big way so your people can find you. This is about bringing your most wild and authentic self into the hustle and grind. Welcome to Tactical Magic, a business strategies podcast for the warrior goddess entrepreneur. Awesome. So David Knox is the author and creator of the Evolutionary Podcast. After decades of working in corporate America and striving for the standard American dream, David embarked on a journey of self-discovery that would lead him to start the Evolutionary, a podcast devoted to examining the acceleration we see happening in our species at this special time in human history and what we can each do to be a part of the awakening and the mutation of humanity into a species that perceives its unity and thrives in balance and harmony with itself, its environment, and the consciousness within it is nested, within which it is nested. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Very well written, not so well spoken, but welcome to the show, David. So glad to have you here.
So happy to be here.
Yes.
Did you know that this is my first time on this side of the mic ever?
No, I love it. You've been rocking a podcast for a while, but this is your first time being interviewed on one, so that's really exciting.
That's right. I would also like to note that my very first interview on the other side of the mic that I performed was Miss Molly Mandelberg.
Well, we're just coming full circle. I'm just your first time on both sides. I love it.
I know. It's so exciting. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you
awesome.
for serving that function and purpose and that nurturing vibe and everything that you have provided. This is fun.
Yes, of course. It's my pleasure. And so David and I met at Burning Man, I think, or we met through our Burning Man family.
No, it was on Playa for sure.
Yeah. And just immediately sort of tuned into the fact that we both vibrate on a spiritual frequency and like to talk about the esoteric and existential topics of the world. And he's been one of my favorite people to just geek out on this kind of conversation with. So I'm really excited to share that kind of conversation with all of you. But first, I want to talk about the Evolutionary Podcast and sort of how that happened. You don't have to talk about how I helped you launch it, but how that came about and how you were sort of being tapped on the shoulder by this message and how you gave into answering that call.
Yeah. So I was sitting around in my late 40s a couple of years ago, and I was struggling with something that we all struggle with, right? And that thing was trying to create my own fantastic life, right? And it was going pretty well, but I think everyone kind of has this hit and miss thing, especially when they're working with the esoteric, right? And we'll just call it the law of attraction, even though that's a little passé right now. But, we're all working with our energies to try to attract the life that we want. And it was going really well, but some things were really confounding me. And this hit and miss nature of that endeavor was really kind of eating at me. At the same time, I look out at the world and it's on fire. It's a freaking madhouse out there. And I'm thinking to myself, if I don't do something about the world, if we don't do something about the world, then our lives don't matter because we won't have a place to live it. And so I'm wrestling with this quandary, and I decide that I've got to, and I have an insight, and I'll share the insight with you in a moment, but I decide that I can't spend another year in corporate America. I've got to get out of the soul-sucking, tech sector job and actually try to do something that's going to make a difference and help people in the world. And I was led through synchronicity down to a seminar with my good friend Molly Mandelberg, and many synchronicities lined up. Like I was just getting assaulted from Santa Cruz Cup coming up. You send me this thing, it has a seminar in Santa Cruz, and it's addressing 4 things, and 3 of them I'm interested in, 1 of them I am not. And it was book writing, public speaking, doing seminars. That's what I was interested in. And podcasting. I was patently not interested in that. I told my partner, Katie, in September, I'm not interested in doing that. She's like, why don't you do a podcast? No, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that. So I go down there with you, spend 2 days at a 3-day seminar, realize that I have to do a podcast, because most of it was about that, and it just made sense. It's the mechanism through which I could go out and not only try to build some interest in the idea that I have, but also it gets me to sit down and write the book, which is brilliant because I haven't actually found anything to get me to do that before I started this podcast. So fast forward, that was in late October last year. Yeah.
That was almost exactly a year ago.
Yeah. And I had already quit my job. My last day was, I had already given notice. My last day was Halloween. And fast forward a couple months and I'm working on my podcast and I'm like, it's complicated. I mean, there's a lot of things to have in order, right? I mean, it's not that hard once you figure it out, but I needed help. So I reached out to my good friend, Molly Mandelberg again, who I keep referring to in the third person, please forgive. And and you got me sorted out on all kinds of fronts in terms of the copy, all of the tech in the background, how to launch, how to do a launch party, which got the Evolutionary ranked on Apple for a couple of weeks, and it got it to show up in the search. Like if you don't do that, you don't actually show up. You can put in the Evolutionary, everything perfect to the letter, and it won't show up unless we go through that exercise, which we did. So it's a huge success in that respect. And yeah, we're 31, 32 episodes in now, and it's just good fun. I get to talk to the best people, and it forces me to put my the format of the podcast is most of the shows are interviews with awesome people like yourself. And then every 4, 5, or 6 episodes, I do a solo cast, which is just me talking. And it is the actual bones of the book. It's the kind of fleshed out outline. And I'm coming right up on halfway really soon. And probably about another month or 2, I'll be halfway done.
That's so exciting.
And so
Oh my
we'll launch
God.
into the other half. Yeah.
There's so
that's
much
gonna be
about
fun.
that I love, that you were listening to the call, you took dramatic action in your life to actualize it. And even though you were telling yourself, no, I don't want to have a podcast, you noticed that that was actually something that was going to catalyze this message to go further. And you even were smart enough to utilize the creation of your podcasts as a catalyst for accountability in creating your book, which has been sitting on the shelf, not getting worked on until you put this sort of machine in place. So that was brilliant. You figured out a way to sort of mind hack yourself into writing this book. If you were to summarize what the Evolutionary is all about, I know I sort of spoke to it in your bio, but like in everyday terms, what is the purpose of the Evolutionary? What is it about?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I was struggling with a couple of things. One is the fact that the effing world is on fire, and maybe I should do something about that. And the other one is the fact that it's been hit and miss with the law of attraction. So I was thinking about, what is that variable that's missing? Why is it hit and miss? And a question occurred to me. It was one of the best questions I ever asked, and that is, why would the universe care to give me what I want? Because the whole manifestation culture is predicated upon this assumption that the universe will give you what you want. Never heard a good answer to that at all. In fact, I had heard stuff like, it gives you what you want because that's what you want, and that's just not very satisfying. I'm actually kind of a skeptic at heart. So I'd also been studying physics a lot with Nassim Haramein's Organization Resonance Academy, and other physicists as well. And there's this idea that has come around that we live in a holographic fractal universe. And what that means, the holographic part means that all of the information of the whole is present at every point, right? Which means to us that we've got access to all of the information in the universe. And the fractal part means that the equation or the pattern that makes up the entire universe also makes up everything within the universe. It's the same pattern. It's the same equation that's making up us. And so our nature is the nature of the universe. We don't have any choice about that. And the nature of the universe that we can observe is that it's evolutionary. It's like from the Big Bang on up, especially from biological life on up, we can see this. All sciences agree on this, that the universe, and we used to have this Big Bang dead universe bullshit, entropy kind of crap. That's out the window. Physics has moved on from that. We now believe that we live in a fully evolutionary universe. And so if that's the nature of the universe, that's what it wants us to do above everything else, above our happiness, health, and wealth, sometimes even our personal safety. It will drive us to evolve. Now, we can have that happiness, health, and wealth, personal safety, but we have to get on board with the whole evolve stuff, right? Because that is our prime directive. I call it the primacy of the evolutionary imperative because I'm given to fancy titles. And that is the secret to the secret. It's the thing that's missing from our manifestation practices. And we get on board with that and we can start to move past the need that we have for the same old problems in our lives, right? We evolve and then we get to trade them in for better problems, better challenges, because I mean, that's always going to happen, right? And so when I realized this, it just fell into place. And so much of my life made sense up to that point, and so much of the way became clear in terms of like, where do I focus now? And also, I wanted to share this idea because it occurred to me that in the manifestation culture, we have a lot of very seasoned manifestors that are doing amazing jobs in their own lives and maybe even in their small communities. And yet secretly they feel like the world is doomed. And so they're walking around with this kind of background noise, this state in the background of their mind that says, I think that the world, like, we've gone too far, and we're not going to be able to pull up out of this nosedive. And if a seasoned manifestor has that belief, that's a problem, because they're much better at manifesting than the person who isn't aware. And so, they might be carrying 100, 1,000 times more creation power than someone who isn't aware. And so one of the things that I want to do is reach all of you manifestors out there and let you know that it's really important that we hold the vision that we want for our lives couched in the vision that we want for the world. It's like of the utmost importance that we hold on to that we cultivate it, and then we defend it against all of the bullshit that is coming at us, right and left, especially this year and probably next year and maybe even beyond. The world would like us not to hold that vision. We need to hold that vision so that we can manifest that vision. And it's right there. And people are waking up right and left all over the world at all levels, at all types of organizations. It is the time of the second Renaissance. And it's right now. We're moving into the age of magic and miracles, and I'm really excited about it.
I'm really excited about it too. And I love how eloquently you just put that. And I think that I talk about it also as an act of rebellion, to look at the world right now and to look at the direction we all know, and we're like knowing, expecting, and aware of the likelihood of all these things that are supposed to occur if we keep going the way we've been going. It's anarchy to choose to believe in a future that's different than that. And it's not to say we don't believe in the science of it, not to say we don't believe in the likelihood of it, but it's to actually create within ourselves, within this part of the hologram, that potential future reality that is actually greater than anyone else could ever project or expect or rationally assume will happen. And I love that. That is so worth putting our time and attention into. And one of the things that I love about you, David, is that you are one of the handful of people in my life who is absolutely ruthless about practicing what you preach and about putting daily effort into being the evolutionary and being the person who believes in a potential reality that's greater than the rest of society is willing to believe or can believe or does believe. So what are some of the mechanics of your everyday life that you've gone to master and to practice so that you can be in that state and believe in that future?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's what it all boils down to, right? If you have these realizations, and I say this because I've been working at this for years, decades, in fact, and I've known a lot of people who have been doing the same thing. And when you go into like the spirit head community, you see a lot of people who can really talk the talk, right? And when it comes, but then their life is a complete mess. And, and, and so none of this makes any difference unless we can like figure out how does it change the way we brush our teeth, or the thoughts that we hold in our head, or what we're doing while we're driving down the street. Like, that's what matters, the everyday moments, right? And so it's actually the perfect question. And the entire second half of the season and the book is called the Evolutionary Dynamic, and we'll be getting into that very soon in the Evolutionary through the solo casts, starting with solo cast 8. I'm about to launch solo cast 6. But the things that kind of make it up, just to give you a preview, are one second. There we go. Are ultimately what we're going to do is we're going to first dismantle our worldview, because we have this idea that our worldview is accurate. And the idea that accuracy should even come into the conversation when talking about worldview is incredibly misleading. Even the best physicists of today are like, yeah, everything is perception, and perception is completely up in the air. And it's all based on our beliefs, and our worldview is what we were given when we came into this world by our parents and society and school and all of this stuff. And so we all have this underlying worldview, and we kind of have this consensus thing going on, and that's what we see going on around us. But it's all a perception. It's all based on beliefs. And if we change our beliefs, we actually have a different experience in life. And if we can do that in the microcosm, well, shit, we can do that on the macrocosm. We can actually change the world in a single generation just based on worldview. So the first thing that we do is dismantle our worldview. And I don't think dismantle is right. I think it's expand our worldview. Because if you get down to the reality that nothing is accurate in our worldview, and our worldview only serves to limit our possibilities, then what we really want to do is take the boundaries and move them out as far, make them as big as the universe. And then you can believe anything that you want, right? I mean, it helps if it's serving us. Like I talk about a fluid utility-based belief system, meaning that I can change my beliefs at any time based on new information. And there's some things that there's criteria. They need to be in line with what I would like to see in the world. They need to at least somewhat resemble my experience, right? I mean, I don't want to get hung up on that, because our experience was based on our worldview, and that could even change. But then the big question is, do our beliefs serve us? And do they serve the rest of the world? And if they don't, change them. Like, try something else on for a while, and find something that serves, and then use that. And then when it no longer serves, change that one. This is a skill set, and a practice is really important for today's world, because things are going to be changing a lot. The next thing is that we have to curate our own consumption. This, like, if I had one thing to tell, if a muggle came up to me and said, I'm going crazy, the news and the world, and I'm full of fear and stress and anxiety, and tell me one thing, please, I have 30 seconds, I would say, curate your own consumption. And everything that you eat, drink, watch on any screen, listen to, all the conversations you engage in, your relationships, your sexual partners, everything is a consumption. Everything that comes into us is remaking us every moment of the day. And so if we are not really like militant about saying, what do I want to take into me to recreate me, then we're at the whim of society, right? We're on Facebook, we're scrolling, we're on any of the platforms, we're listening to the news, we're listening to people get spun up about their personal life or about the larger world events, and we don't get to actually choose what we're trying to hold in our heart and what we're trying to create in terms of our life. So the biggest thing is to curate our own consumption. And then we're going to get into, in the next half of the season, how to cultivate an open and active dialogue with the universal mind. And that's kind of a lofty, fluffy way of saying that we have to be very, very aware that we're always in that communication. We're always in that conversation. And so we have to be aware of, what are we saying? saying, quote, air quotes, meaning everything that we think, feel, say, and do is an outgoing communication to the universal mind, right? And so what are we putting out there to the universal mind? And especially if we think of it as everything that we think, feel, say, do is a communication to the universal mind regarding how we would like our world to be. And I heard Michael Singer say something along the lines of, if you had a kid and you gave them something and they complained about it, what would you do? Would you want to give them more good stuff? Or you'd be like, fine, here's some bad stuff, right? It's kind of the same thing. Like, we have to be able to put our attention on what we want to create that. And then we have to really pay attention to what we're hearing back from the universe, what life is telling us through the circumstances that develop through our personal relationships, and especially through synchronicities, because it's so fun.
It is so fun. And I just want to reiterate what you just said, because I know there's a lot of people, even people in the spiritual world, even, I mean, you and me included, that aren't impeccable with our word all of the time. That, yes, it is hard. People say it's so hard to change the way you think about things. Most people think it's impossible because it's challenging, but it is literally a practice. And there's so many resources and tools to support you, and so many groups and so many people you can be in relationship with who are going to call you on it, to literally just start changing the way that you speak and the way that you interact with that conversation with what you call the universal mind. I would call source, or the universe, or, some people want to call it God. When we get impeccable with that word, everything starts to fall into place more easily. Everything starts to shift and change. And it's the same thing in the way that you curate your consumption. If you start to be huge stickler in what you're receiving and what broadcasts you're tuning into and what relationships you're willing to give your energy, and how you are not a victim or a passive receiver in any of those situations, and you start to take charge of that and not control it, but curate it, like you said, then that whole feedback loop of the universe giving you something back and you giving the universe something back, it starts to get easier. It starts to become natural. It starts to become a habit. It starts to become so much more clear to you energetically when you say something and then go, ooh, I just said I can't, or ooh, I just told the universe I want that. No, let me come back and start over. This is what I'm actually creating. This is what I actually desire to see in my life. This is actually who I want to receive and be around, and all of that. It's a practice, and it's hard, but it's not impossible. It's just something we have to start learning how to do if we want to be on that high flying zone where we live in a world that doesn't have to end soon.
Absolutely.
The stakes are
So
high, but it's worth it.
Our words are, you nailed it. Our words are so important, because they're like, when I say think, feel, say, do, I say that in that order for a reason, because our thoughts actually have been overbuilt a little bit. There's so many of them. That's the only reason they're so powerful, is because they're a fucking deluge. A single thought is not that powerful. And next powerful but it is powerful because we have so many of them, and what we do with them matters. But then our emotions are even more powerful, because they're emotions. I mean, they move our whole body. They're so energetically impactful, and we don't have as many of them. So each of them is a lot more important. But then our words, like last time we talked, you talked about the tree of life and the Kabbalah, and the study of the Kabbalah is how to bring something from that state of pure potentiality into idea form and plan form, and then eventually bring it on down through the sephira of the Kabbalistic tree of life into manifestation here in the kingdom. And once you say a word, you just did that, right? You gave it some concrescence on this plane. And so our words are incredibly powerful. And that's like the whole NLP thing, right? And like learning how neurolinguistic programming, if you're not familiar with it, people, and you can look at the roster of my show or Molly's show and see probably several people who are practitioners of NLP if you want to get some training. But it's learning how to use your words very precisely. And you're right, it's just practice. Everything is practice, right? If we just start trying to do it a different way, pretty soon it becomes just a natural thing. And we hear the slips and we correct them. We surround ourselves with people who support that. And a lot of people get really kind of excited about the idea of spiritual bypassing. And I want to have a side note about that. Spiritual bypassing, of course, would be when you try to pretend like everything's fantastic, even though the world's on fire, and you just go, oh, everything's going to work out perfectly, la, 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 braid my hair. This is not that. It's not hiding from what's happening in the world. In fact, when you really get in touch with yourself and you start to resonate with the collective intelligence of the whole, then you actually feel what's happening in the world a lot more viscerally, which kind of sucks. But you also, right, because I mean, there's a lot of tragedy going on. But you also recognize at the same time that the news that we see, that we're fed by the system, right, by society, by media, by science, by what, all the other components of the matrix, is no more real than the news that they're leaving out, right? And so I would like to suggest, and of course it's impossible to have any stats for this, I would like to suggest that for every atrocity that happens in the world, there's 1,000 acts of kindness.
Yeah,
but we don't
the
hear
news
about those.
isn't
Those aren't
covering that.
newsworthy.
No, and it's not
right?
lucrative to cover that kind of news.
That's right. And if you doubt that, then you're watching too much news. But also, if you doubt that, think about your own life. How many cruel things do you do for every kind thing that you do? Right? And most people are going to be like, most people don't do cruel things very often, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all slip up, we all have those moments, but the world is a lot better place than it makes itself out to be.
Right.
And we are a lot closer to a lot of things that are going to serve to evolve humanity very quickly than most people realize. And I think that's the core message of the evolutionary, is to say that we're on the cusp. We're at the tipping point. It's already started to tip. The question is, how fast is it going to tip, right? Because every day that we don't evolve as a species is a day that millions of people live in violence and lack and destruction and fear and stuff like this. So just from a humanitarian perspective, if you want to do something, evolve yourself, right?
Yeah,
Like,
sounds so simple, but we can do that. Start taking it seriously in your own life, in your own daily practice of your life. Start being a beacon for the truth. Start being a person who's willing to evolve into their highest self, trusting that there's a collective wave of this occurring that's going to start pulling people along in its wake. And that's how the shift happens.
And it's important to know that everyone's going to have a very unique path, right? Everyone's going to, and they have to find their unique path, because, I could sit at the feet of the Buddha and do all the stuff that he said and not reach enlightenment because it was his path, not my path, right? So, he can point the way and maybe you still have to go find it. And methodology, you just, if you don't know what to do, start trying some, right? Start looking. It's going to speak to you. You're going to find the stuff that makes the most sense, and you can do some of the things that I suggest, or some of the things that you suggest in your book. Congratulations, by the way, on finishing that first draft.
Thank you.
Looking forward to reading it. But you're going to find stuff that speaks to you, and that's always going to be changed. It's not like you ever arrive, right? It's a path. It's a path that goes all the way through your life and probably into the next one. And but the point now is that it's go time for humanity, and we're at a very special time in human history where many factors have come together to make it possible for a very few people to have a massive impact on the collective consciousness of the species. And so it's only going to take one more person to do this, and that's whoever's listening right now. Right? If you do this, the world's going to be saved.
Yes, you. We're talking to you.
We're right there, and that's, I think, the biggest thing to know, is that there are so many people that want to wake up right now. There are so many people that are asking, how can I help heal the world? That we're hitting that tipping point, and the tipping point, it doesn't have to be violent. In fact, it can't be violent. It's violence would be a regression. Revolution means to revolve, to go back and do it again. And, you know, ecologically, we don't have time to do that.
Right.
We don't have time for another repetition of violent revolution and then rise of whatever, and then violent revolution, right? We have to evolve now into that species that is beyond violence, and that species that lives in harmony with each other and with our environment.
And as Michael Jackson would say, I'm starting with the man in the mirror.
That's right.
Yeah.
That there's so much magic that goes on with that microcosm, macrocosm thing, like the personal alchemy of transforming your world by outer world by transforming your inner world.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Gandhi stuff about be the change you want to see. There's so much magic that goes on there. It just jives with the Ho'oponopono kahuna stuff from Hawaii. And it's like getting our minds around the fact that I actually created this entire world, me, and I'm sustaining it as it is, me, with my worldview and my beliefs and the feelings I hold in my heart. And if I can change those, I can change the whole world.
Yes. And there's no better day to begin than right now. And
right now.
Because I know us, I know we could actually talk about this for many, many hours. So I want to remind people
because
that
we have.
Yes, because we have, and we do, and we will. That you can get into this conversation even deeper by checking out the Evolutionary Podcast. It's theevolutionary.libsyn.com, or you can find him on Facebook, or you can find The Evolutionary Podcast. Is that Instagram? Is it The Evolutionary or The Evolutionary Podcast?
Instagram is The Evolutionary Life, and Facebook is, the group is called The Evolutionary Life.
Awesome.
So you should be able to get to it at Facebook/The Evolutionary Life. I think it'll take you right to the group.
Okay, awesome. Or facebook.com/groups/
And I'm working on my website.
Fabulous. We're still working on the website, but the podcast is available and the book will be out soon. If you guys are interested, please go follow David Knox and check out this movement and this message, because it's potent AF and it's a great conversation to be inside of. Lots of insights and wisdom. And is there any last words? I mean, we've been giving people a lot of good, juicy stuff to go out and think and do and be, but any last thing you'd like to leave people with?
Yeah, this is really important. Have fun.
Yeah.
Jesus, find some joy. I mean, this is really important to do, to put into the morphogenetic field of the species. Like it's a service, it's an accomplishment to experience bliss and joy. So do that. That's a good first step.
Yes, that feels good just talking about it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, David, so much for being my friend and for being a beacon for this message to just be broadcast out into the world, and for doing the work to show up and make a podcast that has this at its core. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for you being in the world, and I'm grateful that the world gets to receive your magic in all the many ways that you're going out and sharing it. And thank you, everyone who's listening. Please go follow David Knox, check him out. And while you're here on Tactical Magic, please rate and review the show. Share it with a friend if you dig it. And we will be back next week with another episode. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Molly. I love you.
Love you. Bye.